Welcome aboard! Here we are at episode 12, an even dozen of sessions filled with easier and safer cruising ideas. Before we dive in, we would really like to thank again all the SSCA cruisers who contributed their time, opinions, and ideas to this summit. They epitomize the SSCA spirit of sharing information and helping their fellow members. The main subject of this episode is one we're all interested in, especially with the electronic-filled, energy-hungry cruising boats of present day. Planning, building, and maintaining onboard electrical systems. Learn how to create a balanced energy system calculated to your specific usage and charging needs. Hear about battery options, advantages, disadvantages of each, and average lifespans. Listen attentively if you've been considering a new lithium battery system with all its complexities, and perhaps how to save thousands of dollars on a DIY build. We also have a good variety of short subjects, ranging from best way to be seen at night in an anchorage, to rallies, yes or no, to two of our newer members telling us how they've come to love the cruising life, how they've committed to cruising as equal partners, and their impressions of cruising today. Without further delay, we join the conversation with me quizzing Rob Dubin about electrical systems. And then Dave McCampbell gives us a great electricity primer.
When we were making our sailing videos for Sailing Quarterly Video Magazine, one of the people we worked with was a guy named Kevin Jeffrey, who had written several books on outfitting boats electrically and all the equipment that he had tested, all sorts of equipment. And I think the first thing that you need is, number one, you need a systems approach. So it doesn't do you any good to have giant 10 different solar panels if you don't have big enough batteries to store their energy. It doesn't do you any good to have a giant inverter that will run your microwave if you don't have batteries that can put out that much current. So you need a systems approach to everything to begin with. And the way you should start is you should do an energy budget, and you can do this on an Excel spreadsheet. Put down each item you have on board and how much you use it. So if you use your lights, you tend to use 4 different lights in the evening, and you each one for 3 hours. You put that down, and you put their amperage down, what their amp draw is, and you figure out how many amps you're going to use in lights. How many amps do you use on your water maker per day? And you figure each item you use and how many amps in a day. Now you know you need to regenerate 160 amps in an average day. So you have your energy budget, what you're going to what's required to run your boat. Now you can figure out how you're going to generate 160 amps. In my case, I had 2 high output alternators, and I could run my engine for 20 or 30 minutes, and I could make fresh water, make all the electric energy I needed for all my other uses. I was heating my water at the same time through the heat exchanger in the engine, and I was sucking down my refrigeration plates. So I had it figured out as to how many amp hours I could regenerate. I had big enough batteries that could take a lot of current in a short period of time. So I had a systems approach to it. And that's what I would recommend. And as I said, do it on an Excel spreadsheet, create your energy budget, and then figure out how to solve it.
Yeah, you're right. This is a big subject. And I might mention that Nigel Calder, who we all know and respect, has said many times, including the couple of times I've seen him speak, that 75% of the repair problems you'll have on your boat will be electric in nature. And for that reason, I paid attention. I paid attention to electric on our boat. And he has a manual, Boat Owner's Mechanical Electrical Manual, that should be on every boat. In some areas, that's a little too detailed for me. I don't understand it all, but there's a lot of really good information in there. So we had to do a very detailed wiring diagram of the boat, and I would recommend that to anybody buying a boat, that they either get one from the owner that's accurate or do one themselves, because once you get going, and if something goes wrong electrically and you have to go searching for why, you better know where to look. And the electrical diagram will certainly help with that. So a couple of little pieces of advice here that I'll just tick off. First, you really need to know what your daily usage per amp hours is, and match your battery capacity to that, and then match the charging capability of your charge sources to that, so that you're not having to run your engine or a generator every day in order to keep up. We particularly like using our solar, which means we don't run the generator, we don't plug in, and we don't run the engines except when we're having to move someplace. But it takes a bit of work to figure out how much solar you need in order to be able to do that. And the other thing is you need to cruise where there's sun. So if you're going to Northwest Passage or cruising up the East Coast in the, whatever it is, the summer, I guess, when they have all that fog, then maybe solar is not the thing for you. But if you're going into the tropics and doing a trip across the Pacific, like most of us do, that are headed around the world, solar is the only way to go. So that takes some looking into. Another thing that takes looking into is what type of battery. I started off with flooded lead acid batteries. Those last 3 to 5 years generally in a cruising situation as a house bank. AGMs are reported to be an 8-year battery. They'll last about that long if you take really good care of them. Our gels are now 13 years old and still fine. And the reason for that, part of the reason is not only is it a good technology, but also the battery voltage stays steady throughout the entire life. So they're kind of like the old nickel cadmium flashlight batteries, is that they'll be fine and you won't notice a difference until the very end of life, in which case the voltage then drops off. So we're at 13 years now. 15 years is about max if you take good care of them, and they have been taken well care of. So we've decided it's time to change out. And finally, lithium are not that old yet. They're not even 20 years old in a cruising situation, house bank situation. But they are expected by most experts to last 15 to 20 years with all the advantages that go along with lithium. And that includes things like less weight, less size, far faster charging capability, and a whole lot more capacity for the size of the battery. We are using lithium ferrous phosphate batteries, which are the battery that most cruisers use, and it's considered the safest. So that's what we bought from China. There are a number of people here in the Philippines that have bought these kind of batteries from China, and there's a whole lot of information on the internet about them. I particularly wanted to do it as a do-it-yourself project, not a drop-in where you buy batteries that look like flooded lead acid batteries, consisting of 4 cells inside a box that you couldn't get into if something went wrong. We decided to buy the individual cells, 3.2 volt cells. So we bought enough of those to give us a 550 amp hour battery bank, and that's at 12 volts. And again, a steep learning curve, because you have to have a battery management system, you have to have relays, and a whole bunch of other things. The wiring has to be done properly. But you can get by for about $3,000 doing it that way. If we had been in the U.S. and hadn't had the option to buy in China, or maybe didn't want to and just hired somebody to install them, it probably would have been 3 times that, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to get that. So it is possible to do, and you can get those in the U.S. Regarding charging sources, there are several different options. Solar, which we consider to be the best, alternators, generators, and wind. We use our alternators as a backup. We've got 2 little 60 amp externally controlled regulated alternators. We only use those when we're underway, never at anchor, and oftentimes we have those shut off using a little on-off switch in our field wire. We're talking about charge sources, the options for charge sources. I mentioned solar to begin with as the best option for us because there's no moving parts, and it's really cheap. They're down to about 50 cents a watt right now. When I bought my first ones, they were at $4 a watt and far less efficient. The alternator we use only as a backup, and the reason for that is that we just don't need it. We're able to recharge our batteries using our 800 watts of solar every day by about midday, and that's with a 150 amp hour load on a daily basis, normal daily basis. Generator and wind, again, I think are probably only required if you have a much larger load than that, maybe 2 or 3 times that, and you just need some extra input there. The wind, I think, is really not worth the cost. Many of the people that sell solar and wind say you need both, but what we found is that the wind is not blowing into the tropics that often. You're often anchored up behind an island, so you don't get enough to really make a difference. And the wind generators are a pretty expensive option, and often they're mounted right above where the solar panels are, so you get shading on the solar panels. But anyway, so that would not be my preferred option. Again, solar would be the best option as far as I'm concerned.
So one of the most that breaks most often that is reported in the SSCA used to do this survey. I don't know if they still do on items that are what breaks the most on your boat, and it's always a generator. So we elected not to go with a generator, and I built a special system to have 2 high output alternators built into my main engine.
The goal here is to install equipment that will give a cruiser a balanced electrical system that is able to reach full battery charge pretty much on a daily basis without running the main engine or a generator. In other words, using alternate energy to charge your batteries. So now things these days are much more complicated, but also much better for your batteries and for the entire electrical system. Regarding LED lighting, they're pretty inexpensive now, and you can retrofit with small circuit boards the incandescent fixtures. So you just remove the incandescent socket and wire in the little circuit board that you buy off the internet. Pretty cheap, and also works very, very well. All of our lighting now is LED. Regarding the refrigeration systems, the 12-volt CCOP, which is now was the Danfoss system, but has now been bought by CCOP. The evaporator plate systems are pretty efficient and are the norm for most big boxes. The big advantage is spreading the daily load over 24 hours instead of over just 1 or 2 hours like you used to have to do with the old cold plate systems. We have 2 of the very efficient Frigiboat keel cooler systems that have no saltwater cooling pump and no fans. And these, one of them is on our 8 cubic foot refrigerator and the other is on a 4 cubic foot freezer. And these are sized using BD50 compressors so that we can run them at the lowest speed, which is also the most efficient, up to 30% more efficient than if you had to run it at a higher speed to keep up with the heat load. AGM and gel batteries are now installed on most new boats, and the big reason is probably because there's no watering, no equalization, really no maintenance, other than you still have to do the lead acid thing by daily getting a full recharge. Solar, which is by far the best alternate energy source, has really gotten inexpensive now. It's less than 40 cents a watt, and for that reason it's the most popular alternate energy source. So using 800 watts, we are able to fully recharge our batteries almost every day in the tropics with solar. As a matter of fact, we've only run our little Honda 2000 generator twice in the last 3 years. And we didn't even have alternators for a year and a half of that. And finally, lithium batteries. These are fast becoming the holy grail of batteries, and mainly because of all the advantages I mentioned above. So they're well worth considering for full-time cruisers. Well worth taking a good look at this before you decide whether you're going to do it or not. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick look at why we might want to install lithium batteries on our boat. First up, there's no need to really get to 100% charge on a daily basis, like is required for lead acids. And that's because lithiums don't need to get to 100%, and they would prefer actually to be charged to something less than that. As a matter of fact, if you're going to store them for 6 months or so, you'd want them down around 50% charge. So for us here in the tropics, if we get 2 or 3 or 4 days of really cloudy weather, it's no big deal. As long as we can recover enough to not get really low on the batteries, we're just fine. We don't have to get to 100%. Next, weight. Lithiums weigh somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of what lead acids weigh, and that would be for any of the lead acids. So for instance, on our boat, we offloaded 390 pounds of gels and put on 100 pounds of lithium cells, actually, not full batteries, but cells, and ended up with 50% more capacity. And that brings us to capacity. So lithiums will give you about 50% more for the same amp hour rating. So for instance, our gels were rated at 600 amp hours, and in ideal situation we might be able to get 300 amp hours out of that, versus our lithiums are rated for 540 amp hours, and we're able to get 450 amp hours out of that. And that's just a difference in the two types of technology. And then the space, there's a little bit of difference. Lithiums require about 2/3 the space of lead acids, but on a boat you're going to need a box with some cushioning because of the problems you're going to have if you get in rough weather. You really don't want to be bouncing the lithiums around, so you need a little bit of cushioning and a box to hold them in place. Regarding charging, lithiums charge much faster in the bulk charging mode because they charge at full charge all the way up until you cut the charging off, charge termination. There's no absorb required and no float when you're charging lithiums. Service life is pretty significant. Lithiums will get up to 20 years service life. That's 20 years. Whereas lead acids, you're lucky if you get 5 to 10 years, and that depends a lot on the quality of the lead acid battery, the type of lead acid battery, and of course if you're able to get them to full charge on a daily basis. And then voltage. Lithiums rest at about 13.3, maybe 13.4 volts, and they have a very flat charge and discharge curve. So if you're discharging them at, say, for in our case 50 amps, you've got 50 amps being pulled out of them on a discharge, they still stay at about 13.3 until you get way down in the bottom of the capacity curve. That's just the way they are. Whereas lead acids, they usually start off at between 12.6 volts and 12.9 volts, but as soon as you put a high amp draw on them, the voltage reduces significantly. And obviously, higher voltage is much better for the equipment. So why might you not be willing or want to install lithium batteries on your boat? Well, first up, and probably the most important, is that if the owner of the boat is not willing to spend time in studying and fully understanding lithium technology, then it's really not a safe thing for them to do. If all you're going to do is just hire an installer, let them do their thing, and then hope that everything's going to go well for the next 10 years, you're really taking a big chance. It took us months of research to finally feel comfortable with doing our own installation. And then there's an increased expense, of course. It may be true in the US with a hired installer and with pre-assembled batteries, but not necessarily true overseas if you're using cells from China, which is where most of the cells come from, and you're doing a do-it-yourself installation. It's about this. For us here in Philippines, it would have been about the same cost as replacing our 4 high-end gels. Back in the States, the numbers I've seen indicate to me that it'll be at least 2 to 3 times the cost of installing just regular lead-acid batteries. And that has a lot to do with hiring an installer and paying the extra surcharges that dealers charge you for the batteries. Also, if you're a monohull docked in the U.S. and you're not so concerned about weight, and you use the boat only occasionally, then maybe a better option for you would be Quality Gels. Our Sunny Shine gels lasted 14 years on this boat, but they were properly cared for. They were charged to 100% almost every day using solar, and that's really the best way to handle lead-acid batteries. And lithiums also is a good solar system that has a proper charging capacity to be able to recharge your batteries every day. And then there's the possible expense of major electrical system components having to be replaced. So kind of an electrical system overhaul, including new equipment, and if you hire an installer. We don't recommend using an installer for a number of reasons, and you can read all about that in the next section, which is the references. And finally, some references. There's a lot of information on the internet about lithium batteries, installing lithium batteries. There's YouTubes, there's websites, and there's forums, just all sorts of information. Some of it, most of it, is pretty accurate, but some of it is not so accurate. And depending on whether you're an off-grid home owner, an RV owner, or a boat owner, your installation may be different. So if you want to look at what we did, our electrical and battery notes and details of what we did with how we did our installation is at www.svsoggypaws.com/electricalsystems.htm. And if you can't remember that, just go to svsoggypaws.com, go to the workshop section, and then go to the electrical section. The title of the articles is Are Lithium Batteries for You? And it includes several other really good trusted resources that we used. Also, that article, the main article there, and there's more on our website than what's in the Cruisers Workshop, but the main article is on the SSCA website under Cruisers Workshop. Same title, Are Lithium Batteries for You?
Okay, that was a very well done presentation, and I think it's a very good explanation for people that are just starting out in this area. Maybe they just got a new boat and they're thinking, what am I going to do for electrical system? You outlined it very well, Dave, and I think people learned a lot, especially the thing about the new lithium batteries and how maybe if you are a little bit handy, especially with electrical, that you may not have to spend $10,000. That's pretty interesting in itself. Hope you learned a lot about electrical systems, batteries, and charging, so you can hold your own at the next Yachty get-together and discuss electrical batteries and all those things. Next, we join Eddie Keck talking with Luke and I about masthead lights versus deck-level anchor lights.
2 examples. It was years ago when, in a moonless and very dark night, I was entering a bay which I knew from earlier days. And I knew that once you're inside the bay, you had a steep hill on your starboard side, which was completely wooded. And when we entered that bay, it opened up suddenly, and I could see a light on that wooded hill. And I remarked to my wife, I would not ever have imagined that somebody would be able to build a house there. And at that very moment, a dark hull was immediately in front of me. It was not the house which showed a light, it was a masthead light. Or a second example, we were approaching a fishing harbor at right angle more or less, and you could not make fast inside, you had to anchor it. There was enough space in that fishing harbor that you could anchor. And on the shore opposite, or above the shore opposite our track, was of course a road. That road is a few meters, let's say 5, 6 meters, 7 meters above the water level. And that road is of course illuminated. And behind the houses with the restaurants and the workshops, everything was full of lights. Totally, completely full of lights. Then you still have cars going back and forth, and you are really seeing nothing at all. Now you enter, and when entering, one has the tendency to look straight ahead, at the level straight ahead, of course, left and right, but usually not at an angle of 30 degrees up into the sky. And while doing that, we entered, and suddenly we had a boat in front of us. Couldn't see a thing. Below the waterline, on the shore, everything was pitch black for us. Everything above was illuminated, and that chap had a mast top light, which of course mingled with all the other lights ashore. So I would say a masthead light may comply with the regulations because it shows all the way around, but it does not help other yachts people, sailing people coming in, nor does it help local boats when they come in. It's just a light up in the sky. And I don't know of any sailor, haven't seen any yet, who enters any bay or any harbor looking always at about 30 degrees above the horizon. That doesn't exist. And I was thinking, a light on top of the mast. I have not seen anybody rigging an anchor ball on top of the mast yet. Possibly that would look rather interesting. On the other hand, if you have a proper anchor light, which you rig on your forestay or perhaps on one of the shrouds, you have a light which can be visible at a normal eye level. And in addition, it gives a little bit of light also vertically downwards, illuminated your deck. That means you can also see the deck from a certain distance, not just the black hull. Of course, rigging such an anchor light takes a little bit more time than just switching on the light. That is, if you don't have an electronic switch. It takes a little bit of time. Perhaps not much longer than pouring an anchor drain.
I agree with you, Eddie. And in fact, in all our years of cruising, we very quickly started to use an anchor light, like you say, right there over the deck. And in places where they were like port and everything, we will also put the anchor light is on top of the mast for regulation. But the main thing was the big light. It was right on the deck, like you say. They make the deck visible and everything. And I think it saved the day quite a few times, because you are right. Nobody look at 30 degrees, and it's tough to see it when you approach. And in Southeast Asia here now for a few years, it's also become the pandemonium because the fishing boats are putting all those flashing lights of all different colors. And I think that sometimes is very confusing because we have been in some night passage where we have to go like in a buoy channel and everything. And here I'm following on the chart and I know exactly where we are, but it doesn't correspond at all to a red flashing light and green flashing light. And I say, well, am I following the light or I'm following the position on the chart? So we kind of like had really good eyeball navigation. And then finally we realized that those red and green flashing lights were fishing boats. They had absolutely no other light. They were tiny little bankas doing bottom fishing, and they were in very shallow water, completely out of the channel. So it can be tricky with those flashing lights and everything. And I guess now we see more and more boats. They also put those flashing lights all around their vessel where they are at anchor. So I guess one point could be that it's not too much regulation, but I kind of think that if you can be seen more and at least kind of get the attention to any boat passing, is better than have not enough light and not be seen at all.
I agree with you. An anchor light is of course complying with the regulation, but if you turn on your masthead light as well, you make yourself more visible. That is, of course, I do not say don't switch on the masthead light. I say switch on or rig an anchor light first, and then you can also switch on what do you call it? An anchor light. No, masthead light. And about those flashing lights, that I remember this can be a pain. Not only that they have no other lights on those boats, but often they have those lights very far down attached to nets.
Ah, yes.
And that is a bugger.
Yeah, that's why here, like in Southeast Asia, the best is to try to not travel at night, because you have all those fishing boats, trawler, bottom fishing boats, and also nets and traps and fish aggregation device in all a different order. And going at night, you cannot have good eyeball navigation, and you run a higher risk to bash into something solid or to get things in your prop and everything. So that's why we try to do day navigation as much as possible. But yeah, it can be a problem. But definitively, like you say, to have an anchor light rigged on the deck level is the best way. Even if to put, if you have enough energy, if you have those lights with little solar panel included, or you have enough energy, you can put 2 or 3 anchor light, one at the bow, one at the stern, one in the middle, or more you see, no better it is.
Well, and then you recognize your boat as well when you come back with your dinghy.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Another idea to save power in the batteries is what Luke did. Is he put an LED strip, and he wound it 360 degrees around a little spool, and we put it in our old anchor light that came with the boat that has a Fresnel lens. And for those people that don't know, a Fresnel lens is like the old ancient lighthouses had, where it magnifies the light. When you used to have a little kerosene light that you could barely see, this kind of lens would magnify the light, and that was the kind of anchor light that they used to use. And when you put a little low energy use LED in there, it's amazing the bright light we get, and often our light is the brightest light that we can see, and so it's easy to find us. And another idea that some boats had that I thought was quite ingenious is they put reflective tape either along their sides or around the mast or vertical on the mast, And then if you have an anchor light, like you say, close to the deck, you not only will maybe see the deck, but you might get some reflection off of these reflective tapes, and not too many people have that kind of reflective thing, and that could take your attention, and then you would know it's something, not just a signal buoy or something to get your attention.
Yeah, we put reflective tape in red, green, and white on our different hulls, because with our trimaran we are pretty wide, and that way a boat coming in the anchorage may very well using a spotlight, and if the spotlight hit any of those reflective tape or whatever, give them an indication also of the side of the boat or anything, even in navigation actually.
Well, perfect idea.
We have two cockpits, one on starboard side and one on the port side on our trimaran, and so we have cockpit lights there with a little remote control. They can be switched between 8 or 10 different colors, or even Christmas lights once a year. We can make them blink, and those are actually our backup navigation light. If the masthead light navigation fails or what, at least at the deck level we can put red on one side, green on the other one.
So we conclude that sometimes it's more important to be seen and avoided and have unregulation lights than merely meet regulations for the anchor light. Some cruisers poo-poo rallies and those who are in them. Others love the rally ambiance. We've done both, and we like both for different reasons. So let's listen to Rob Dubin, who, like us, has done both, and he gives us some ideas of how to avoid the pitfalls of rally and the subject of buddy boating.
You know, rallies are certainly a personal preference. We were part of the very first Caribbean 1500, and it was a wonderful experience. We did the Indonesia rally, and that was 15 years ago now, probably, and the people that we met on the rally are still some of our closest friends, and we're spread all over the world, Kiwis and Aussies, and we all were just on a Zoom call the other day. So I really value the really deep friendships that a rally can engender. I think there are some things to be worried about or be cognizant of if you do decide to do a rally. We did the Indonesia rally in particular because there's a lot of paperwork going in and out of Indonesia, a lot of bureaucracy, and the rally just handled all of that, which was worthwhile. The danger of a rally is that, especially when we see people doing the Mexico, the Baja Ha, or some of those, is that then they are in the foreign country with all of their best friends, and they never make any real effort to learn the country. So if you do a rally and you get, if you do the Caribbean 1500 or a ARC rally to get across the pond or something, that's terrific. But spend some time socializing with the locals, learning the locals, getting to know the locals. Don't just insulate yourself with this group of Westerners that you then travel around with as a big cadre. And the Caribbean 1500, one of the things that they provide, which maybe all of the rallies do now, I don't know, but they had somebody that really had done a lot of offshore sailing look at your boat before you left and make recommendations about how you should rig things or what you should fix or what you should carry. And so it is a good chance for novice sailors to get some expertise and to have a little bit of a safety blanket. You got to realize when there are two boats out at sea, you probably can't do very much to help that other guy if it's a bad storm or anything like that. So don't think that it's a giant security blanket. It's a little security blanket, but there's limited resources, limited help you can give to another boat in bad situations. And that brings me to buddy boating in general. We saw in the Bahamas, after we'd been there several years, lots of people who were, it's their first offshore thing, their first winter cruising or whatever, and they would be in these large buddy boat groups, and often the guy who was the most outgoing extrovert became the captain of the fleet. And one year we saw this guy who gave his own daily weather report, and he literally did not know anything about weather. He couldn't predict weather. He didn't even know how to read the weather he was getting. But all these other people followed him. There was a group of about 7 or 8 of them, because he had the loudest radio and the most outgoing personality. And he got them all into trouble multiple times, and they still never figured out what to do. So if you do join a rally, still realize it's the social side of it is terrific, but don't let it not expose yourself to the country. And the other side of buddy boating gets to be, if one boat breaks down as you hop through the islands, you need to have a plan what you're going to do ahead of time. If somebody breaks down in a remote area, obviously you've got to stay with them until they get to safety. But we often saw these groups of boats that had started heading down through the Caribbean islands, and boat number 1, broke their autopilot, so everybody stops and stays in port for 2 weeks while they get a spare part. And then 3 weeks later, boat number 2 breaks their autopilot, breaks something, and everybody stays in port for 3 weeks till he gets his spare part. And that's not a good way to travel, because you just end up traveling you spend all your time in port. And instead, if boat number 1 broke his autopilot, they should see that he gets safely into the next port, but then have an agreement that you're going to carry on, and he'll catch up with you somewhere down the road when you're stuck in port with a broken part. So that would be my recommendation on that.
Okay, thanks for your advice, Rob. It's good to keep a balance between being a traveling clique, circling the world together and never meeting anyone else, and the difference of taking time to break away a little bit to meet the locals and discover something new and stretch our horizons on our own. We were very happy to have met through this summit Vinny and Karsten aboard Capri, who are newer members. It's great because they give us old crusty cruisers some new perspectives about cruising in today's waters. Vinny and Karsten, tell us your story, how you got cruising, and your evolution on getting hooked on this lifestyle.
I'm Karsten, and I'm Danish. I was born in Denmark, but I grew up in the United States. Had a lifelong dream since I was a boy of sailing around the world, or at least sailing to all those wonderful places that nobody ever goes. To be honest with you, I never thought I'd ever get to realize that dream, and here I am. I'm actually doing what I've dreamed of since I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. So that's really fantastic. As I say, how many people get the opportunity to live out their boyhood dreams? Virtually none, and that's just a fantastic thing. It's a gift in your life that you get to do that. And of course, the reason I'm able to do that is I ran into this lovely young woman, and it turns out that she didn't have that dream when she met me, and the first few times I started to talk about it, she said, "Me, sail out in those waves, those big waves in the Atlantic, you're out of your mind. Do whatever you want, I'll get an airplane ticket and meet you in the Caribbean." But we managed to.
It changed over time. Definitely, I didn't have a dream of cruising or circumnavigate at all. And when Carsten started talking about crossing the Atlantic with a rally, I told him, well, do that, and I'll take the plane and we'll meet over in the Caribbean. But we got a house close to a marina, and Carsten, he told me that we should buy a little boat, a little sailing boat, and we start our sailing career. And I took some sailing course, and I find it very interesting. And after a few years, it was more and more interesting for me. And Carsten, he started buying books over circumnavigating. And then finally it came to me, and cruising and circumnavigate, that's definitely also my project, and not only Carsten's. And I think that's extremely important. Otherwise, a lot of women give up when they have started cruising. Before we left Denmark, we thought about, well, maybe we are going to circumnavigate. But anyway, the first thing was to cross the Atlantic. And we said, if we don't like passage, then we'll just stop cruising after Caribbean and send the boat on a freighter back to Europe. But we liked the passage, so we continued. And as Carsten said, he grew up in the States, and he told me about ICW, and he would like to show me that. And that was a very good experience. Sailing is not that interesting because you are motoring almost all the way up. There's only a few spaces where there's room enough that you can go by sail, but otherwise in a sailboat you are motoring. But the nature of the ICW was incredible. And I saw another side of United States, because normally when I go to the United States, it's in the big cities, and that's the American I have met. So going up ICW and explore the rural United States and the southern culture, that was totally different for me, and it was a really good experience. And I have to say that sailing into New York, and I have been in New York several times, but sailing into New York Harbor, that was very sensitive for me. I was almost crying when I saw the skyline, and I saw the Statue of Liberty, and that was really incredible.
A lot of men have the dream. It usually turns out it's the men that have the dream of going sailing, and they try to get their wives on board, and they can't for a lot of reasons. And a lot of people have asked me, how did I ever get Winnie to agree to all this? And actually, she should probably tell you, but I'll start it by saying, in reality, the only way you get your wife to go with you is to get her to be an equal partner in the project. And she has to feel it's her project too, and that means she has to be a sailor, not a glorified autopilot. She has to be able to sail the boat by herself. And that's particularly true if you're going to double hand the way we do. Because we double hand also on passages, as you two would know, it's 4 hours on, 4 hours off. So you sleep for 4 hours, and then you have 4 hours on watch. And you can't just call the other person every single time a squall comes by or something happens, because then they'll never be able to sleep. So in reality, you have to be able to single-hand the boat, no matter what comes along, practically. And that means both of you have to be very, very good sailors. And a lot of men never get their wives to that point, either because the men aren't willing to give up the role of being the big, strong guy who knows it all, or the women are timid, which they generally are at the start, and never really learn it. Winnie and I, when we started sailing, we made the agreement that we should both be able to sail the boat. Now, this was at the start, it was a 22-foot boat. But we made the agreement that every time we go in a marina, one of us would, one day one of us would be the helmsman or helmsperson, to be properly woke these days, and would skipper the boat in and out, and the next day it was the other person's turn. And that meant that we both got very, very good at skippering the boat, both docking and undocking. And we also had the rule that the person who is at the helm, that's the skipper. So if the helms person said, we need to shorten sail, or we need to shake out a reef, or we need to trim the sails, that's what was done. That meant that we both learned, I'd say, almost equally fast, but we both learned everything. We'll let Winnie talk a little bit now.
Well, I think for me, it has been very important for me that I have been really a co-skipper. I mean, when we make the decisions, we do it together. It's not only Carsten, definitely not, and it's not only me. And I think it's very, very important that both are very active in decision making, navigation, and whatever. And my advice for the women will also be active in preparing the boat also. I know the men are more technical than we are, absolutely, but there's a lot of things on repairing or preparing a boat that a woman can do. And yeah, I like getting my hands dirty too. You call me?
Winnie's our winch wench, as I call her. She is the one that at least once a year, really before every long passage, disassembles all our winches and cleans them and oils them and puts them back together again. And she also, she does the regular engine maintenance, changes the impeller, checks and changes the oil and things like that. We get into deeper things on engine repair, and it usually becomes me. But the normal run-of-the-mill
checking the rig and
yeah. I mean, Winnie doesn't like going up in the mast at all. I don't like going up in the mast, but I have to say she really doesn't like going up.
I don't enjoy the view from up there, not at all.
So when somebody has to go up and check the splitters and all that ends up being me, simply because she really doesn't enjoy it. But that's fine. We all have different skills, and we all have different things we're good at. Winnie's our onboard weather forecaster, and she really does know what she's talking about. I mean, I know a fair bit about the weather. We both are yacht master oceans, so we learned it when we took our theory. But Winnie's gone far beyond me in reading reference texts and understanding what's really behind weather patterns. So, what is it that when you're sailing around in the South Pacific that you have to keep your eye on, which is not the weather where you are, but mainly the weather where it is down in New Zealand somewhere. So it's very important. We both feel if you're going to double hand, if you're going to have this as a project, that both the man and the woman have it as a common project, and they both are engaged and have invested in it, invest themselves in it. Otherwise, it won't be successful. And those are all the boats you see that are for sale in Tahiti, because after the first long passage, the wife said, well, never again.
Absolutely, yes. I have never regret that I quit my career in early age. I enjoy every day cruising, absolutely. But I can't say we have had anything we have been disappointed about, but there has been things that has been different what we expected. In Caribbean we knew it was very touristed and a lot of charter boats. It was very, very positive for me when we were in St. Blas Island in Panama, and we were visiting a Kuna Indian, and they invited us home in a private home and for a little dinner. That was really the most authentic culture life I have had on this in these 5 years, because we found a Kuna Island where we were the only sailboat. We were the only one on the anchorage, and only local people, and that was incredible. That was really incredible for me. It was surprising for me that in the Pacific that we meet so many cruisers. There's really a lot of cruisers in the Pacific. And of course, because we have the GPS and a chart plotter, it's much easier today and more safe to sail today. We can get our grip files every day, so it's more safe. So there's a lot more cruises in the Pacific. But that also means that it was different than we thought, because anchoring. To find a volcano island where you can find an anchorage where you are the only boat, you can be lucky, and maybe you're only lucky for a few hours. It's really hard. Well, I know we have only been in the French Polynesia, but even in Marquesas, it's not that touristic. But still, it was there was a lot of boats in every anchorage. And when I have read a lot of books about circumnavigating, and I had expected that we have met a lot of very, very nice people, but it has been a very, very short term, because then our way was different. I know in Caribbean we decided to go up along the coast in the United States. Everybody else went back to Europe, or they went over the Caribbean Ocean to Panama and out in the Pacific. So that means that our social life has been very on short term. I think in the old days, sailors were more dependent on each other to talk about the experience and what is your strategy, what is my strategy, and so on. But today, I mean, everybody's just Googling the information, and you are not that dependent on each other anymore. And in the old days, you were more on your own when you were out cruising, but today, I mean, you have Skype, you have Instagram, whatever, and you were talking, if not daily, then weekly with your friends and your family at home. So you're not dependent on the own work, and that has been different for me. And it's in French Polynesia, of course, I expected that the French has a huge impact on French Polynesia. And I know they have given a lot of money for the local people also in French Polynesia. But I have not expected that in my cases, for example, or in the Tuamotus atoll, that everybody, all the local people, they were walking around with a smartphone. And that also means that they are not very dependent about the sailors, what kind of information we can deliver. They are only dependent on the money they can make on us. And today, a lot of cruises, the boats are bigger and bigger, and the local people, they're not stupid, of course. They can Google and see, and this sailboat out there or this catamaran out there, it costs more than $1 million. So of course the prices on the islands out there, they goes up, they increase. Mm-hmm. So everything is much more expensive than we expected also. So I would say that the local people are much more civilized than, if I may use that word, than we had expected, and the sailors are more, I would say, individualistic. Instead of, we are not dependent on each other in the same degree that you were in the old days.
My expectation, well, it's been everything I expected. And more, mm-hmm. Certainly, and as Winnie said, never regretted for even a second, ever, casting off the lines. What was radically different? Well, certainly some of we didn't expect to get to Polynesia and find that everybody, and I mean everybody, is driving four-wheel drive pickup trucks. Even in a little place like Tauhata, which is a terribly tiny island where there are two small villages about 2.5 kilometers from each other. Well, the French have built a road, and where they used to sail back and forth or walk back and forth, now they all have four-wheel drives and are driving back and forth for 2.5 kilometers. It's just unbelievable. And the same is true for everywhere else. Everybody's got four-wheel drives and smartphones. And amongst the cruisers, if you read the older cruising books, and by older I mean those written, say, 25 years ago or before that, when cruisers would come into an anchorage after a long passage, if there were other boats there, and there usually were, as soon as the anchor was down, one of the other boats would, their dinghy would be coming over and usually bringing some fresh baked bread, or at the very least an invitation. Get yourself settled in, and come on over and we'll give you some dinner. You don't have to worry about cooking tonight. We're going to take care of that for you. Lots more, I think, what you would call beach parties, campfires on the beach, and lots more potlucks that you read about. Today, with the internet, every cruiser, as soon as they drop anchor, is busy looking for, where can I get on the internet? That's the very first question anybody asks, is where's your internet? And wherever there's internet, the internet cafe, or wherever there's places you'd sit, you can get internet. That's now become the new social gathering place. But it's not so much a social gathering place, it's a cruise zone, and they're all sitting there, doing things like getting weather reports. They're checking their mails, which they're Skyping with people at home. They're like us. I mean, like me. I'm the keeper of our blogs. We have a website, and so they're sitting and uploading blogs or uploading videos. And what it means is you got a bunch of cruisers sitting around, not talking to each other, but staring at their screens, which is not exactly what you call social life. So that's been radically different, very radically different. And also, you go back 25 years ago, and chart plotters weren't around. GPS was just coming on. People who sailed back then, they had to use a sextant, and they had to have paper charts. And in reality, they had to be sailors. I mean, you couldn't just, because you had money, decide to go. And we've met, and I think there are more and more and more of these kinds of sailors out there. They have accumulated a fair pile of money. They buy a big boat, and they fill it with every imaginable electronic gadget that they can. And, they don't need to be as much of a sailor anymore. I mean, they can look on their chart plotter and they say, what's the course for Fatuhiva? And the chart plotter says, there you go. And they can even put in a route to Fatuhiva from the Galapagos, and they can sail it. They don't need to understand anything about ocean currents or even navigation. I mean, if they're coming off course, their chart plotter will tell them, oh, you're coming off course, come about 3 more degrees. And I'm not decrying that. That's another way for people to travel. But what it means is there's a lot more people out there circumnavigating or making long cruising voyages that are not the way sailors were 25 years ago. And they're much more staying on their own boats and less into socializing with people like Winnie and me, who are trailer trash, as you would say, because we have an older boat, and we're not traveling first class on a 55-foot sailboat. So that's been radically different. And certainly also in the old days, on many smaller islands, when a sailboat came, the local populace was very happy, and it's a way to get news from the outside world, but they don't really worry about that anymore because even in the Marquesas, they've got 20 channels on their TV. I mean, they don't, a sailboat coming in doesn't excite anybody anymore.
Now people, yeah, like you say, they look it up on Google. Like Google knows more than the local guy that's been sailing those islands for years and years. And it's kind of sad. I believe that there's still a lot of value in communicating personally, like you say, going to a boat that's next door, or you pull in and you see a boat that's anchored there. You don't know how long they've been there, but we go over and we used to do book exchanges, if anyone knows what that is anymore. Take a book and say, okay, we finished reading that. Do you have a book to share? And then we'd exchange information, ask them about this or that. And in many ways, I still think asking people and personally interacting with people, the camaraderie idea, is very meaningful. And people that just go on the internet and try to look it up, they are missing out on a lot. Hey, thanks Vinny and Karsten for sharing your observations as relatively new cruisers. It's quite interesting to hear how things have changed since we were cruising in those areas. What is a silicone wedding band, Bill?
A long time ago, I decided I didn't want to lose one of my fingers on the boat. And, there's a lot of dangerous things and ways you can damage or lose a finger on your boat wearing a wedding band, particularly if you're a racing sailor. And probably the most famous guy that almost lost his finger, spent 4 hours in surgery getting it reattached, is Jimmy Fallon, the host of the Late Show, or the Tonight Show, rather. He almost lost his finger in the kitchen by his wedding band almost tearing his finger off. So it's a danger on the boat. And I was talking to some women, and they don't want to wear their diamonds and their good jewelry around the boat either, but they still want to wear a wedding band. So what's the solution? Well, us boomers don't know about this, but the millennials do. It's called a silicone wedding band. And it can replace, while you're on the boat, it can replace your metal wedding band. They're inexpensive, anywhere from $2 to $20, depending on where you're buying them and how fancy they are. Come in different colors and that sort of thing. And they'll protect you from losing a finger should your wedding band get caught on something. It's a finger saver, if you will. It's also a wedding band saver. Great idea, inexpensive.
Right, a good marriage saver, so you can't be accused of slipping, taking off your wedding ring. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been on Amazon and I see it's a big business, and there's some really beautiful designs. And I didn't even know they were such a thing. So like you say, I don't have any contact with millennials, but I guess it's a really big popular thing, and they come in all kinds of colors and sizes and prices. So that's a very clever idea. Thank you. Well, that's it, folks. Another great episode wrapped up. Our next episode? We're throwing it out to you. You shy ones, what do you want to hear? Contact us at sloopmoosh@gmail.com. Can't wait to hear from you. So remember, fly your birdies and swallowtails and invite others to join SSCA to benefit from sharing knowledge, ideas, personal friendships, and getting access to all the great stuff we present in the Easier and Safer Cruising Summit. Talk to you next time. We hope you enjoyed listening to our guests and took away some new ideas for yourselves. If you have something to say about any subject you heard, it's not too late to join in. Be sure to check out the preview of our next episode. Comment and subscribe on SSCA YouTube channel. Share this video on your social media. and join the camaraderie by participating in our coming new episodes. If you're not a member yet, visit SSCA.org to get in on the conversation and gain full access to the SSCA Easier and Safer Cruising Summit.